Welcome back to More with Mojo, where I go solo to talk about topics outside the scope of our normal podcast episodes. This time around, we're going to be talking about Seasons 7, 8, and the movie of Regular Show, wrapping up Regular Show as a whole. So yeah, let's jump right into it. To be honest, when I started Season 7, I thought it was just going to be more of the same, and, I might have been okay with that, but thankfully they start to mix it up relatively quickly. It only really takes Mordecai's single episode to get over the disastrous end to his relationship with CJ that happened at the end of Season 6. And from there, Mordecai's character arc really starts to shift. He starts to focus less on trying to find and maintain a relationship, and starts to think more about his future. Does he plan on working at the park forever? If not, where else would he work? Where would he live? Stuff like that. While Mordecai ponders over what he's doing with his life, Rigby gets a lot of character growth as well. While in a lot of ways he still is the annoying little creature from the first two seasons that causes the majority of the issues, he really does grow to be a character who cares about the people around him and wants to improve himself for the sake of being a better person. For example, he decides to resign instead of let Milliard fire Benson. He helps Mordecai through his post-up depression, again. And most importantly, he decides to go back to high school to get his diploma, which becomes the central story arc of Season 7. This change in Mordecai and Rigby's priorities really help highlight a shift in the show as a whole. For the most part, the main characters stop focusing on the here and the now and start focusing on bettering themselves and maybe preparing for their future. Speaking of Mordecai and Rigby's future, the movie takes place sometime during Season 7. The plot is centered around Rigby coming back from an alternate future to save his friendship with Mordecai. He has to come to terms with some shit that he did in the past and apologize for it. It really is a massive sign of character growth for Rigby. And it's during the plot of this movie, most specifically the part where Mordecai meets his future self, that I feel Mordecai really starts to think about what he's going to do with the rest of his life. All in all, the movie's pretty damn good. It feels like a longer, bigger, better version of a Regular Show episode, and that's just damn awesome. Its space theming also gives a lot of hints and foreshadowing of what's to come in Season 8, but more on that in a moment. Meanwhile, back in Season 7, Rigby returning to high school is not the only recurring story point. We also have this recurring arc involving Milliard, Pops' father, hiring a bunch of scientists to put a dome over the park to seemingly study the park itself and its employees. The fact that they're being followed around by scientists and now live inside of a dome has at least a minor effect on the plots of the remaining episodes of Season 7. And it's actually because of these scientists and their shenanigans at the park that we get the most massive piece of character growth in Pops, of all people. It's revealed that Pops, throughout his life, has been looking and enjoying the view of this one particular planet every couple years when it comes around. And if he cannot get a chance to see it, he starts to have bouts of uncontrolled telekinesis in his sleep. Both this planet and Pops' powers are massive plot points in Season 8. So let's wrap up Season 7 so we can get there. On the very last episode of the season, both the major plot points of the season come to a head. Rigby graduates high school and gives a speech that is by far the best example of his growth as a character. And at this point, it's revealed that the scientists at the park were never actually studying the park itself, but instead are retrofitting the entire thing to be a giant ship that they can then launch into space, which they promptly do as soon as the main cast comes back from Rigby's graduation. The park and all of its employees with it blast off into space and end Season 7. From this point on, Regular Show was kind of semi-officially rebranded as Regular Show in Space, and for good reason. The show stops entirely being about the day-to-day antics of two slackers trying to not do work, and it picks up this sci-fi, almost Star Trek-esque subplot of space adventure. The problems stop being, oh, how am I going to convince my boss to give me a break so I can go to lunch, and become more of, why are we in space? How are we going to survive? How are we going to get home? While I could totally understand and see why the abrupt addition of so many sci-fi elements to the show could turn off some people, I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd, so it didn't really bother me at all, and therefore I decided to stick with it. Anyway, after a bit of aimless wandering through space, we're quickly introduced to a slew of new yet forgettable characters who run and operate this space tree station where all the parks that were launched off Earth are gathering, so their crews can learn to become space tree park rangers? I don't know, it makes about as much sense as anything else in Regular Show, so yeah. Anyway, For the first, say, 3/4 of Season 8, all the episodes are pretty standard fare for regular show, but in space. They fight off foliage-collecting robots, return to a mantis-inhabited planet to find a lost wallet, and so on and so forth. And then things start to change. We're introduced to regular show's first and kind of only major villain. I mean, sure, we've had, rivalries in the past, like Gene comes to mind, Benson's rival from the other park, but he's really not evil or malicious. He's a jerk, but he's not out to end the universe. We start off not knowing this new villain's name, but he's quickly dubbed Anti-Pops by both Mordecai and Rigby, and he's just that. The Anti-Pops. That is to say, he's the opposite of Pops in almost every way. Where Pops wants to write poetry and catch butterflies, Anti-Pops wants to leave negative star reviews on restaurants that don't deserve it and destroy the universe. Long story short, he's a pretty evil dude. Anyway, we get sprinklings of Anti-Pops trying to hunt down and kill Pops, and eventually it's revealed that not only is Pops adopted, but he and Anti-Pops are brothers who are also gods that are reincarnated every several billion years in order to fight it out and reboot the universe. Which makes just about as much sense as anything else in regular show. Anyway, the way that this Pops and Anti-Pops story arc is handled really kind of shows what regular show might have looked like if it had been a more serialized type of show all around. And it looks pretty good. I really enjoyed the end of this show. The last, say, 4th of Season 8 is basically a back-to-back series of episodes that are telling an arc and telling a story. It's really well done. Of note in this ending story arc is just how self-aware it is. For example, the main cast go and visit a character named the Seer, who is 100% a stand-in for the audience. She talks about how the show, or their universe, is ending, and how that's not always necessarily a bad thing. She talks about the ups and downs of the show itself. She references the show as a show. She even makes a DVD box set of the antics that have happened in the show. It is so frickin' meta. And it ends up getting even crazier than that. Like Pops visiting the original animated short that he was a part of. Or the entire universe dissolving into post-it notes, which the storyboard artists commonly use to pitch the ideas for episodes. Anyway, during the final battle, Pops defeats Anti-Pops not by conflict, but by hugging him to death. He hugs him and they fly off into the sun, and Pops tells Mordecai and Rigby to take care of each other as he sacrifices himself to save the universe. Which of course was the best way for Pops to go out. And then we flash forward 3 years to the ship returning to Earth, and then promptly get a 25-year montage. During this time, Mordecai and Rigby move away from the park and start their own lives. Mordecai becomes an artist and falls in love with an anthropomorphic Batwoman and has 2 children. Rigby, while we don't know what he does for a living, becomes a family man himself with Eileen, has a couple kids of his own. We also know what happens to the majority of the rest of the cast. High Five Ghost becomes like a DJ with his girlfriend. Benson keeps working at the park and hiring new employees. Skip stays at the park as its maintenance man. And Muscle Man and Starla become even more white trash somehow. Who knew that was possible? Anyway, the montage ends with a large reunion with the family of all the major cast members. We get to see a middle-aged Mordecai and Rigby spout their famous catchphrases one last time, and we fade to a heavenly background with a TV VCR combo that spits out a VHS labeled regular show, where we hear Pop say his catchphrase of Jolly Good Show. And that's it. That's where regular show ends. And really, it's a really nicely timed ending. As the kind of meta narrative toward the end of the show kind of pointed out, it was kind of running its course. Regular show kind of did everything it needed to do. It wasn't really exploring any new topics anymore, so they jumped the shark. They went into space. They had this big plot, and they tied it all together and brought it to an end. And that's great. I'd much rather have a show that has a nice, complete, good ending than a show that goes on forever and doesn't explore new things and becomes old and stale. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed regular show season 7 and 8. And I might even go so far to say that the end of regular show season 8 might be some of the best that the show has to offer, at least from a pure storytelling perspective. And I really enjoyed watching Rigby's journey to actually being a decent human being, so to speak. And in the end, I really liked regular show as a whole, if that wasn't obvious from the fact that I watched all 8 seasons. But I really did. I really love its use of real-world music and montages, the non-specific time setting, and the strong emphasis it puts on friendship. And it has a lot of themes about what it means to be a young adult while trying to find her way in life. So yeah, I found it to be a really great show, and I really enjoyed watching it. I'll probably end up watching the entirety of it again at some point in my life. And with that, I guess I conclude the second More with Mojo. Eventually I'll be doing more of these at some point when the right source material comes along and inspires me. But for now, I'm going to end it here. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.